If you've made a pledge to Channel 2 and your employer will match your gift, get the form and send your check to Channel 2, Box 200, Boston 02134. If you haven't made a pledge yet, we'd like you to do that right now. Call 492-1111. And thanks.
Happy Hanukkah from all of us at Channel 2. Local broadcast of Nova is made possible by our members in partnership with the Genrad Foundation, with Harvard Community Health Plan, celebrating 20 years of providing New England a better quality of life, and with Peugeot, builders of distinctive, intelligently engineered European automobiles for more than a century.
Tonight on Nova. High-speed fighter planes have changed much since World War I. But can pilots keep pace with today's high-tech killing machines? Is more technology the answer for Top Gun and beyond?
Funding for Nova is provided by the Johnson & Johnson family of companies, supplying health care products worldwide. And Lockheed, a bold new force in systems engineering, management, and technology services for defense, space, and industry. Major funding for Nova is provided by the financial support of viewers like you.
This brave young man is about to have the oxygen supply to his brain temporarily turned off. His heart will falter. The doctors in attendance concede that it could even stop. And while all this is going on, he'll actually weigh over half a ton.
All right, I need your name and rank.
Name, Darren L. Petrie. Rank, Senior Airman.
Senior Airman Pete Petrie is a research volunteer at the Aeromedical Center at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas. In this experiment, his body will be subject to 9 times the force of gravity in what must be the world's most grueling roller coaster ride, the centrifuge. Scientists here are seeking answers to questions of grave military concern. Can today's fighter pilots cope with the physical and psychological demands placed upon them in combat? Or have we designed a generation of fighters so technologically advanced that they push the pilot beyond the limits of human physiology?
Okay, these boys, there's a base going turning south here. Roger, I'm going in, take off right.
Somehow the biology never got into the picture. They dealt with the technology of conquering the problems of flight. And the engineers who build airplanes today are still basically the same kind of person. They're solving physics problems, engineering problems, power thrust curve problems. They're not dealing with biology. And as a matter of fact, I think this is one of the definers of our current dilemma. We didn't have to up until this point in time. And now the technology has reached a point where it's not just that we're going to lose a pilot because the plane fails or something, but we're going to lose pilots because they can't operate the systems that are being presented to them.
Nowadays, when a fighter pilot climbs into the cockpit of a high-performance jet, he's charged with the awesome responsibility of operating some of the most complex machinery ever devised at speeds that would outstrip a rifle bullet. He will be pushed to the edge of his physical and intellectual limits, and tradition demands that he respond with the right stuff. But this image of the pilot, gleaned from the exploits of the aces of past wars, ignores the reality of aerial combat today. As these highly trained pilots know, their own human frailty may be more of a threat than the enemy, in today's complex and powerful high-performance jets.
We believe that the pilot's workplace is perhaps the most demanding office in the world. Not only must the pilot attend to all the information that's presented on a myriad of controls and displays, he has to do this while being shot at, pulling G's, worrying about getting killed, or missing something that may be flying in from the ground or from another air threat. Also, he has to be concerned about where his friends are located, because he certainly doesn't want to shoot down one of the friendlies. So we feel that perhaps combining all of these things, that the fighter pilot's role is perhaps the most demanding one of any job in the world.
I see him loud and clear.
The speeds have increased, but the problem is that it doesn't have anything to do with the actual speed. It's the relative closure and how quick things happen. In World War II, possibly, we could still see a formation of fighters 20 miles away, and traveling at 300 or 400 knots, we had a good bit of time to think about that. Now 20 miles away is only 30 seconds before I have to start doing something really important. In the past, when I saw an adversary, I immediately started thinking ahead, not how I can kill him now, but how I can maneuver through space, conserve my energy, and wind up in a position to employ the weapons. I don't have time for that anymore. I simply say, there he is. I look around quickly to see if I'm safe, pull the airplane toward him, employ the ordnance instantly, and get out of there. So, see him, kill him, and leave quickly.
That grim but simple motto, see him, kill him, and leave quickly, is in fact what fighter tactics have always been about. Today, there are 6,500 aircraft. That's 43% of all American naval and Air Force planes which qualify as fighters. But this aggregate figure obscures a wide variety of capabilities and technologies that reflect a continuing debate within the military. Should we invest in high-tech or low-tech warplanes? Do we buy a few highly capable but extremely expensive multi-role aircraft, or lots of cheaper single-purpose planes? And, of course, that debate is fueled by intelligence estimates which indicate that the Soviet fighter force may outnumber ours by at least 2 to 1. Currently, the fighters in the U.S. Armed Services straddle the divide. This is the General Dynamics F-16. Short-range, lightweight, supremely agile, and at $16 million each, it's the Air Force's relatively cheap frontline dogfight. The Navy's FA-18 is a bit bigger, considerably more expensive, and has a lot more roles to fulfill. But it's still essentially a hit-and-run fighter in the lightweight end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum is a different sort of creature altogether. The F-14 is the staggeringly capable two-seat interceptor fighter for the Navy. Dubbed the first of the super fighters, the mammoth F-14 literally bristles with sophisticated and expensive radar and electronic warfare equipment.
There's a joke that goes around the industry that says that the airplanes of today are designed by PhDs, they're built by guys with master's degrees, they're flown by people with bachelor's degrees, and they're maintained by people with high school educations. And that's part of the problem, is that they're just too sophisticated.
The Navy justifies the whopping $43 million price tag for each plane by claiming that the F-14 can strike up to 6 targets at once over ranges in excess of 100 miles using its $1 million-a-shot Phoenix missiles. Sadly, that claim has yet to be proven, and the maintenance and reliability record of this super high-tech aircraft has yet to meet the targets set by the Navy 15 years ago. But from the pilot's point of view, it's the F-15 which is arguably the most complex of them all, because he alone commands the various engine, navigation, flight control, and weapon systems. His missions in this remarkable aircraft will range from intercepting long-range intruders, like this Soviet bomber known to NATO forces as the Bear, to tangling with adversaries in what's called the furball of a conventional dogfight. For many observers, the $39 million F-15 epitomizes technology's ability to combat by its quality the quantity of the Soviet threat. For other, less convinced commentators, it's a classic example of an almost religious belief in a technology that is in danger of overwhelming today's fighter pilot. In the F-15 cockpit, for example, there are 300 switches, 75 different displays, 11 switches on the control stick, and 9 switches on the throttle. Complexity on this mind-numbing scale would have been inconceivable to the pilots of the F-15's distant cousin, the tiny Fokker triplane, although both were designed to fulfill the same mission. 50 years of aeronautical development separate these two interceptor fighters. 50 years in which the quest for power, range, height, and speed has produced quite shattering performance. Aeronautical designers refer to what's known as an aircraft's flight envelope when talking about its performance. It's a pictorial representation of the limits of an aircraft's capabilities. And as we trace out the flight envelope of the F-15, the engineers can determine how slowly it can fly without falling out of the air, what its maximum altitude is, and how fast it will go, both in the thinner air of the upper atmosphere and in the denser air near the ground. It's taken half a century of aircraft development to create a flight envelope this large. And by comparison, the triplane's envelope seems absurdly limited. In today's terms, that limited capability seems almost comical. But in fact, when the triplane first went into service with Manfred von Richthofen's Flying Circus, so called because of the garish colors they used to identify each other in the melee of a dogfight, it was a resounding success. Its 3 wings generated a lot of lift, enabling it to climb higher and faster than many of its enemies. In combination with a large single-piece rudder, a short fuselage, and plenty of power, that lift also meant that the tiny triplane was a very maneuverable and effective fighter aircraft.
Actually, these aircraft were as modern in 1917 as an F-14 would be today. They were state-of-the-art, and the engineers knew quite a bit about airplane design. Some of the problems they ran into was that they lacked a lot of things that we now consider essential. For example, they had no brakes, they had no oxygen system, they had no radios, they had no pressurization, and of course they had no parachutes.
Well, just made you think about you're up there off the ground, and you sure couldn't step out and save yourself if anything happened. You just had to be brave and sit up there and ride it out. Wasn't a damn thing you could do about it. You didn't like it, you didn't have to like it.
Bob Todd was barely 20 when he shot down his first Fokker triplane in May of 1917. Within 3 hectic weeks after claiming 4 further kills, he became officially one of America's first aces. He was later shot down himself and spent the rest of the war in a German prison. In a sense, he was lucky, because the horrifyingly short life expectancy of a World War I fighter pilot was a chillingly brief 17 hours in the air. Just 3 short years before Bob Todd's exploits as World War I started, sporting planes were being used only for reconnaissance. But as pilots began to take their pistols and rifles up with them, they spawned a new and deadly art form, dogfighting. Before long, as new designs of airplanes were entering the fray almost every month, the tricks of aerial combat were being learned and practiced. The objective was always a brutally simple